All right, we begin with some breaking news coming in. India and the European Union are all set to elevate engagements with two high-level ministerial visits to New Delhi scheduled for this week. European Commission's Agriculture Commissioner Christophe Hansen and Trade Chief Maros Sefcovic. Visits will coincide with the 13th round of negotiations for a landmark free trade agreement. And this as both sides aim to conclude the FTA by year-end. Now, the European Union is India's biggest trade partner, with bilateral trade in goods recording $135 billion in the financial year 2023-24, besides the trade deal. India and the EU are also in the process of firming up a series of transformative initiatives, including a new politico-strategic vision and key foundational frameworks to expand defense ties. Now, these moves that came against a backdrop of increasing geopolitical uncertainty. And for more on this, Siddhant Sibbu, our assistant editor of foreign affairs, is joining us on the phone line. Thank you so much, Siddhant, joining us now. First of all, tell us about the major developments to track these developments.
Well, India and EU are looking to update their relationship in many ways. First, of course, several engagements, whether it's this week or next few months. And of course, this will culminate in the big summit that will happen here in India, the India-EU summit, perhaps in the first quarter of next year. Now, this week is significant in many ways with the FTA talks, the 13th round of FTA talks. Of course, it will lead to the 14th round of FTA talks that will take place in Brussels next month. But this week, we'll also see two commissioners. That basically means the ministers, EU ministers in agriculture and trade, traveling to India. There are counter-terror talks in Brussels between India and EU later this week. Of course, it's going to highlight concerns over cross-border terrorism. Remember, India has been reeling under a terror attack, the Pahalgam terror attack by Pakistan-trained terrorists. In the aftermath of that, India also, of course, launched its counter-terror operation, Operation Sindoor. And other than that, there is a big high-level delegation, 30-member delegation traveling to India from the EU. So it's a packed agenda, and just last week we saw India and Prime Minister and the European leaders having conversations, whether it is on FTA talks or whether it is on the war in Ukraine. In fact, on FTA, remember during the college visit earlier this year in January, led by Ursula von der Leyen, we saw both sides committing to completing the FTA by the end of this year. That is a major deadline, and coming in the backdrop of Donald Trump's tariffs on India, on other countries as well. So essentially, a lot is expected in India-EU relationship.
And also, Siddhant, how do you look at these developments while we hear from U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent calling on the European Union to join the U.S. in adding pressure on Russia?
Well, of course, Ukraine is something that has been top of the mind, whether it is here in India, whether it's in European Union, and of course, in U.S. as well, where it looks like that the Alaska summit is heading towards a failure with what we saw over last 2 days in Kyiv. So essentially, yes, there has been American asks and American demands, but of course, it's up to India and EU essentially as to how to look up to things, and of course how they have their views and perceptions about how to handle things in Ukraine. India has been very vocal in terms of calling on both sides, Ukraine and Russia, for dialogue and diplomacy. India has said both sides need to sit together and chalk out a deal, and we all know that earlier, just last week, in fact, exactly 1 week ago in Tianjin, the Indian Prime Minister met with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, of course, pointed out to the Ukraine situation, India's stance earlier that month. We saw the Prime Minister speaking to the Ukrainian President as well, restating the same thing. So essentially, India is in the know. India has been an active participant, calling on all sides to make sure that the war in Ukraine comes to an end.
Absolutely, Siddhant. Of course, we'll be tracking all the developments that we see going forward. Thank you so much for joining us and giving all the details.